Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do with the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things that about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, welcome to Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. Today what I'd like to look at is sometimes when counsellors are in training and growing through a process academically of understanding the counselling world, if you like, then there is downsides to it, which the training establishments probably don't tell you about because they want to sell you the course and they want to put bums on seats. But the aspects of counselling, and no matter what modality you come from, really, although some things will be more applicable to people who come from modalities that about feelings, emotions, psychodynamic, not systems and processes. So, but it would still be the same for those people, I think, although that's not my modality. So when we get into this world of counselling, when we look at it, when we think, oh, that would be really interesting to do for a living, the downside is that actually, initially, don't look for a living financially. It won't give you that unless you're very lucky, and get within an organisation that pays you a monthly wage, of which there are some, to be fair. But for most people, it's a process of an addition to what you already do financially. It also, they don't necessarily give you an understanding of what it takes out of you. Doing a job, a physical job, a mental job, in a career kind of way. Generally speaking, yes, there is stresses, there's strains, there's anxieties, there's worries, there's concerns. Those are usually about what you're doing. Whereas counselling, the worries, fears, concerns are about the things people tell you that are not part of your world, in your experience sometimes, can be, but not always. But what they give us in their emotions, their feelings, their life, their stories, their interactions, their worries and fears, sticks to us. And that's not an easy process for most people. The emotional sticking to us, and certainly if it resonates with something that has happened in our lives as well, if there's part of their life that interacts with ours and situations that's occurred, then it can be a really roller coaster process of keeping it together, because obviously you can't tell the client your story. You can't tell the client that this is affecting you, quite naturally. And holding that is a really hard thing sometimes, and can be a very harrowing thing, depending on what's been said to you, what is being relived in the room. And that process is not easy to just take and hold and sit with. Now, we have to do that because obviously the client, it's their world, their theory, their therapy, and their process that they want to explore, explain, look at, work with. But for us, it resonates sometimes. And even if we haven't been through the experience, even if that's never happened to us, some of the dynamics of it, some of the feelings and emotions that go with it, will have, quite naturally. And holding on to that and being able to be professional and be connected in the room without that affecting us isn't an easy process. And you'll find as you develop your practice, which is the only time we learn about counselling, we don't learn in the academic world, we learn when we're in front of a person, in front of a client or clients, in how our world needs to be, how the relationship needs to be in the counselling room, and how to work that experience, the exploration, coming forward, as we learn, as we progress, as we become. And even when you've been doing it 30 odd years like me, it never ever becomes an easy process. You never get to the point, and I don't think should get to the point, whereby it's all okay. I think it always will affect us, and we have to think about that connection and how it will affect us. And that's why counsellors, we have supervision, we have counselling ourselves, because there is a lot of that that will affect us in a way that isn't easy and doesn't necessarily sit comfortably with us. When we're going through that process of becoming counsellors, learning, as I say, the academic people don't necessarily tell us this. They don't necessarily share that with us because they want to sell the course. They want to put bums on seats. Quite naturally, it's a business at the end of the day. Education is a business. So when we're going into that world and we're finding these things out, we have what we call supervision. That's basically a professional person that we hire or has been given to us by an organisation we're working through, that helps us to be objective outside the room, helps us to share those feelings, emotions, thoughts, ideas about the client's work, and to help support us when things maybe get a bit tough for us personally. And then we might need our own counselling to look at those things in our life that's been affected, triggers that sharing. The other part of the world that the academic process doesn't engage with is the financial security of working as a counsellor, of which most people don't have. If you're working within an organisation, then obviously, yes, you might be getting paid, you might not be, depending on the organisation. You might be giving it free as time to that organisation because you want to help, you want to support, you want to make difference for somebody in the process. So there is different strains of being a counsellor. So you can be employed, and some counsellors are employed. There is employment opportunities with counselling. There could be a voluntary process in a placement whereby you're not getting paid, but you're still getting the experience and the knowledge and doing the work. Or there's what we call private practice. Each is different, and each will be different. Sometimes people have 2 or 3 different things working at the same time. So they might be working as a voluntary process. They might be doing some kind of work in an organisation, NHS, or some other charitable organisation. Or they might be self-employed as well as a private practice. When you start out, when you look at where you're going to go with the counselling process, you need to have an area of work that you're interested in. Because if you're not interested in the area of work you're doing, then pretty much it's going to be a hard slog. And it's going to be not easy for you to do. So try and look at what is interesting to me. What type of clients' issues would I be interested in working with? What wouldn't I want to work with can be as helpful as what you do want to work with. Yeah, to give you an example of that, I work and I'm trained to work with families, children, young people. But I won't work with anybody under about 12, 13. Because in my world, my life, under 12, 13, possibly might take me into areas from the client's perspective that was working in my life growing up. And I might not be fully able to be congruent, to be connected to the client work if they start talking about those kind of situations, scenarios. So I've realised that over my many years of working, and I realised that a while ago. So I have to now take that out of my work, which is a choice that I've made. Even though I'm trained to deal with it and I can work with it, and I probably would be fairly good at it, it's the scariness of the triggers that might enable that problem for me in my world, in my life, and in my engagement with the client. So sometimes it's helpful to know what you don't want to work with for whatever reason. Because that's as helpful as what you do want to work with. But if you didn't want to work with something, then there's no point in putting yourself in a position where those clients would be engaging with you through your private practice or voluntary sector or organisational process. Because that wouldn't mean you could be fully engaged with the client. So when you're finding the type of work you want to do, the type of clients you want to see, the things that you want to work with, then engaging, looking for work in those areas obviously is the most helpful. When you start in that journey, and it is a journey which never ends, you never get to a point where, and I don't think you should get to a point where it's just a job. It can't be just a job because of the things we do and the things we look at. But when you get to that point where you understand what you want to do and where you want to work, then finding that is the next big challenge. I was lucky when I first started out. I went into an organisation called Relate, and they looked after me, cushioned me, and gave me the experience and knowledge, the training, and I was lucky for that. Okay, I didn't get any payment, any wage, any financial help, apart from the training was free. I didn't have to pay for the training in the early days. I did later on, but not in the early days. So it meant I just had to give my time, of which 2-3 hours a week was achievable on an evening, which I did. But finding that what we call placement, which is a place where you work under that process of learning, of working with it, is a hard job, because you can't really find many places nowadays. And in the early days, the colleges or the universities used to find the placements for you. They had connections to the organisations and the communities. Nowadays, not so much. They might have lists, but it's up to you to approach and you to find and you to get it. And that's something that they don't necessarily tell you at the start of the work. Once you've found a placement, then it's a case of what time can you give, what time have they got? Because in most of the areas of being training to be a counsellor, you have to do a number of hours in front of a client before you can actually achieve the diploma or the MA or whatever qualification the course is. And without that hours, you will actually be able to be signed off, in a sense. So some of that is really hard to find. And I get lots of emails from people who are in training asking whether or not I can put them onto our business, put them into our organisation, which I don't. I can't. but it means that they are going to get refused an awful lot. And so you need to have that very hard exterior of knockdowns, putbacks, before you can find something that will give you that opportunity. The other thing from a counselling perspective, should I say, two answers that I give when people say to me, what do you do for a living? It comes up as conversation, small talk. They're talking, don't they? Now, if you say I'm a counsellor, then pretty much you get one of two reactions. One, people walk away from you and don't want to ever see you and don't want to share any time with you. Or second, you get bundled into a corner and somebody telling you all their life stories. So most counsellors don't tell people they're counsellors for that reason. And as we're kind of working that process of being accepted, then be mindful that relationships around you when you do the training are possibly going to be suspicious about what you're doing and how you're finding the way the world works, and how that might affect your relationships. Your children might say to you things like, don't you stick that counselling head on with me. Don't talk that counselling language with me. So relationships around you can be a bit strained, dependent on the relationship and how affected or how upset they are about the process of having a counsellor as a friend or a partner, because that can have a major effect on relationships. And I say this when I'm ever doing, nowadays I don't do much training, but in the early days when I was doing training, I kind of gave it as a problem for us as counsellors, and say, well, be careful, because relationships will be tested by this career option you're taking. And they are, because you have to do an awful lot of reflection as a counsellor in all sorts of things. We're always reflecting and hypothesising and wondering and being curious. And so it makes you curious about your own relationships and what's really happening in those relationships. And so it does make you think about and explore your own personal relationships, which a job probably wouldn't to the same degree. So it can be hard on relationships when we become counsellors and when we work that process. Those are the things that a lot of colleges, universities, academic establishments, education establishments won't tell you, because they don't want you to be put off going down this journey. And I don't want you to be put off going down this journey either. But I think you should be aware of some of the peculiarities of being a counsellor, if you like, because then when they do happen, and they will happen, you are more informed to have thought about it before you get there, and you can maybe think about what your reaction would be to those things and how you would work. And when you're doing that, that hard process of how other people are reacting to you or reacting to the journey you're making as a counsellor, don't give yourself a hard time, because those relationships that you're becoming aware of as you do the work might give you ideas and thoughts of what healthy relationships look like, and what you should put up with and what you shouldn't put up with. And sometimes when you're doing the work with the clients, that can really start to sometimes get under your skin. What is it that I'm accepting here? Because there's a mirroring sometimes from the client's world to your own world. And that can be really awkward sometimes to see and to understand. So relationships do come under a fair bit of pressure. And sometimes that's helpful if we can have dialogue about it and we can offer changes and they can offer changes in how they work their world and how they interact with you. And that can be helpful. But if change is not able to happen for whatever reason, or they dismiss the aspect of your new awareness, new knowledge, new understanding, then that can really put a strain on them. And so there's a damage limitation process that you need to think about when you're looking at doing this work. Although, saying that, the last 30 years of doing the work, even though it's been challenging, and it has been challenging, with a great respect, in lots and lots of different ways, I'm totally glad I did it, and I would never have thought about another way of being, and rather done that than done this. It was a hard slog to come from corporate world to counselling world, and I had to make many changes in my world and my life to do so. But I wouldn't change it now for the amount of feelings, emotions, of positive energy it gives me, that helping other people to have a better life, helping other people to understand that they have choices, they have decisions that they can make, moving them forward in their world and their life the way they want to be moved forward, not the way I want to move them forward. And going through with that, going on with that, that's so satisfying to have those conversations with people and for them to share their worlds and their lives in a very intimate way sometimes, and to know that that person really feels that they can trust you with it. It's hugely gratifying and hugely rewarding work to do. So I wouldn't have done anything else. I wouldn't have changed anything else in what I've done. But I would just think about starting this journey. Think about how you're going to be changed or affected by it, and whether or not that is for you. And sometimes it isn't. You know, the old adage of training counsellors is that 50% will want to be counsellors, and 50% will want to be counselled. That's the usual thing for training on any course that we do. And I think by and large that's not necessarily wrong, to be fair, with my experience of training. So think about it. If you go down the journey, if you go down the life, if you go down the process of being a counsellor, wonderful, hugely rewarding process that I would never ever have wanted to have different. But it does have its downsides. And if you can cope with the downsides, then you will just have such a rewarding, uplifting process. You'll never be a millionaire being a counsellor, but then you might have enough, which is what it's all about. Hopefully that's made sense. Hopefully it's been interesting. Hopefully it's been a thought-provoking process for the last 15, 20 minutes. Whatever you do what you want to do, not what other people want you to do. And enjoy what you do. And if you don't enjoy it, do something different. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon, and it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button, and if you've got any comments, please give me them, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.